Well, President Trump's trade war with China is starting to have an effect here in the United States. China's retaliatory tariffs have helped drive down soybean prices, which means soybean farmers in the country are making less money. So now the question is, could this hurt Republicans at the polls on Tuesday? Stephen Shephard has reported on this. He joins me now from Arlington, Virginia. He's an editor at Politico and also the caucus and chief polling analyst there as well. Stephen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, so when you look at this, which states could Republicans really see a backlash by voters on this?
So we're looking at two states in particular that I want to focus on today, and those are Iowa and Minnesota. Each state is home to a handful of really competitive races in the race for control of the House of Representatives, which is what we're all going to be watching so closely on Tuesday night. In Iowa, you have 3 of the 4 congressional districts there, all of which are held by Republicans. Those 3 are among the top 20 soybean producing districts in the country. And so this is a place where any kind of change in the soybean market has an impact on agriculture.
How influential of a voting bloc are these farmers?
Well, look, these are 3 Republican-held districts. They all went, those 3 districts went, all 4 districts in Iowa really went for President Trump, but these 3 districts also elected Republican members of Congress. We've talked in recent days, there's been a lot of talk about Steve King, the controversial Republican congressman from northwest Iowa. His district is one of those big soybean producers. Most of the attention on his race has come based on his controversial comments about race and immigration. This is a pretty Republican-leaning group of people, a group of voters, but they've taken a hit in their pocketbooks because, in large part, because of these decisions by the Trump administration. You
know, Stephen, what was interesting, you mentioned that on the flip side of all of this, that the president's trade approach could actually help the GOP in Minnesota. Can you explain that?
Sure. While we all know Democrats need 23 seats to gain control of the House, and almost every seat that's up for grabs on Tuesday night is currently held by Republicans, but there are a couple of exceptions. And Republicans' best opportunity to pick up a seat is in northern Minnesota on the Iron Range. Copper nickel mining is the big industry there, and folks in that industry, including the incumbent Democrat in this congressional district, are a big fan of the president's tariffs on steel and aluminum. This is something that's seen as helpful to that industry. It's one of the reasons why Republicans are favored to pick up a seat, which moves that Democratic yardstick for what they need to pick up from 23 seats if Republicans do win Minnesota's 8th district. That now becomes 24 seats. So this is something clearly that's worth watching, and a place where, look, anytime you have these sorts of artificial adjustments in the economy, there are winners and there are losers, and it looks like the mining industry in the Iron Range of Minnesota could be a winner. Interesting
to hear you say that. You know, on the other side of this, Democrats who are trying to seize on the consequences of the tariffs, how are they going about that?
Well, usually what they do, because the president is still somewhat popular in some of these districts, they talk about sometimes restoring a check and balance to Washington. Someone who's not, a lot of times the argument is, well, we need to do more to protect our farmers, we need to do more to protect our manufacturing, but we need to do it in a smarter, less blunt way, as just slapping a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum, on steel at least, and then having the rest of the world react to that in a more measured way that hits our farmers in their wallets. They're talking about a smarter approach and hoping that they can convince voters who voted for President Trump and may have voted for a Republican member of Congress to elect a Democrat to Washington who might bring a different approach.
So if I'm a Republican candidate in a really farm-heavy district, how do I handle these farmers' concerns at this point?
Well, what we're hearing a lot from, say, Congressman David Young in Iowa's 3rd district, or the Republican candidate in Minnesota's 1st district, Jim Hagedorn, that's another big soybean producing district. We are hearing the following argument. Look, this is painful right now, but we need to renegotiate and reestablish our relationship with China when it comes to trade and when it comes to exporting your soybeans. We need to be doing this in a smarter way. This may be a short-term hit, but trust the president, trust the Republicans, and we will get a better deal, and come next year and next growing season, you'll be able to sell and have more access to certain markets at more favorable terms than you even had before.
So I'm curious if these farmers in these districts just don't buy that argument. Let's say there are these big losses in these districts. Do you think that would ultimately grab the president's attention?
Well, look, we all know how President Trump got elected in 2016. He flipped Iowa, he flipped Ohio, he flipped Wisconsin. He came close to flipping Minnesota. He also flipped Michigan and Pennsylvania. That was his, and North Carolina and Florida. That was his path to the presidency. And anything that disrupts his 2020 path to re-election is something that would surely grab the attention of the White House.
Great to have you on, Steve Shephard. Thank you very much for joining us, Stephen.
My pleasure.